Tonight, will South Australia backflip on its plan to open up its border to Victorians next month? And a government minister gets up close with Australian giant cuttlefish.
From our 7 Spencer Golf Studios, your nightly news with Louise Huber begins now.
Good evening. South Australians' borders could remain closed to Victoria, with the eastern state recording another high day of COVID-19 cases. While no decisions have been made yet, Premier Stephen Marshall says he's working closely with the Victorian government but won't open the borders if it's unsafe to do so.
With South Australia's borders earmarked to reopen next month, a shadow of doubt has fallen over whether that'll include our Victorian neighbours, with the eastern state recording 16 new COVID cases in the past 24 hours.
What we have seen in Victoria over the last 7 to 10 days has been worrying.
So far, the July 20 plan to lift South Australian borders has still got the green light, but Premier Stephen Marshall says the health and well-being of residents is top priority.
We have worked so hard, we do not want to go backwards, so we won't be opening our borders if it's not safe to do so.
Those entering South Australia from Western Australia, Northern Territory, Queensland and Tassie don't have to quarantine when they get here, but because the favour hasn't been returned, residents returning from SA will have to self-isolate. That's raised some concern on whether it'll impede on tourist numbers.
If you're a resident of, say, Perth and you want to come across to Port Lincoln or to Adelaide, it's going to have an impact when you have to come back into your own state. But again, it depends on how long they decide that they're going to keep those barriers up.
Despite what could be some tough love to our Victorian neighbours, regional towns such as Port Lincoln say they'd rather have the borders shut for now and concentrate on attracting the local market from Adelaide, as well as keeping our community safe from COVID-19.
Interstate impact on tourism is limited at this stage, and the closing or keeping the borders closed is not going to have a significant impact.
Nathan Richter, 7 Spencer Golf News.
Australian giant cuttlefish are once again in the spotlight, with concerns the state government isn't doing enough to protect the species. But the government is rubbishing those claims, saying the decision to not ban fishing in certain areas is backed by science.
Witnessing the unique species in action, Tim Whetstone diving deep with the Australian giant cuttlefish at Point Lowly.
Now I know what everyone is so excited about. You know, they really are the movie stars of the ocean.
He wasn't the only one. Tourists from all over Australia snorkelling and diving with the majestic creatures in an experience unique to Whyalla.
It's amazing. There's heaps out there, like hundreds, I would say.
The numbers of cuttlefish out there at the moment really is just inspiring to see that the numbers are back, large and small, and the different shapes too.
I came from Brazil, so this was one of the trips that I've always wanted to do in Australia.
The minister visiting the area as concerns about the species continue. Here at False Bay and Point Lowly, there remains a permanent closure zone where fishing for them is banned. But outside those areas, commercial and recreational fishers can troll for them.
While they're aggregating at the moment, it's so important that we have that protection in place to protect the numbers.
Those fishing areas prompting claims the protections don't span far enough. Eddie Hughes worried their numbers will be affected as the fish have to travel through unprotected areas before reaching the banned zones.
The protection should never have been diluted.
But the minister says there is new science, that there is no large spawning aggregations outside the area and further protections aren't necessary.
The science is undertaken by the SARDI scientists and fisheries. So we're doing stock assessment all of the time, making sure that we keep an eye on the numbers.
The issue has become such a concern that Labor's Shadow Minister has been petitioning for the reinstatement of full protection for the cuttlefish in open Upper Spencer Gulf waters.
It is unique, it is spectacular, and it attracts people from around the state, interstate, and from around the world. It should be protected fully.
Sophia Contigonis, 7 Spencer Gulf News.
It was a cult classic film that made some question whether to venture into the ocean ever again, and now 45 years on, the movie Jaws is being remembered. Rodney Fox Shark Expeditions is reliving the story of the killer shark by returning to the location where parts of the iconic film were created.
Since it first hit the screens in 1975, Steven Spielberg's Jaws has left many still fearful to enter the water. Not only did the thriller break the box office, it also wound up creating a legacy for Port Lincoln.
In the early 1970s, when the live footage from Jaws was taken, we had American camera crews come over. Spielberg likes to talk about how he owes a lot of success that he had later in his career due to the movie Jaws.
From killer sharks, small towns and the hunt for revenge, the iconic film made millions and is now being celebrated 45 years on. While watching the cult classic in theatres is out of the question for now, an expedition to go to the breeding grounds of the apex predators this weekend is being organised.
You're going to need a bigger boat.
The two-day trip will depart from Adelaide this Friday and make its way down to the Neptune Islands, where passengers can jump in a cage and see the predators in 3D.
This early winter, late autumn season that we have, this is when the big female sharks turn up and the big boys too.
On board Rodney Fox Shark Expeditions, the American film crew got up close and personal with great whites at Dangerous Reef and Memory Cove. Since then, the tourism company has helped monitor and promote the conservation of the apex predators.
It ironically inspired a whole generation of researchers and conservationists to love the great white sharks in particular.
Nathan Richter, 7 Spencer Golf News.
Stay with us. Still to come tonight, calls for better water quality in the Flinders Ranges rejected, and the government cracks down on people disposing of household waste the wrong way. Hello again. A regional council is disappointed its calls for better quality drinking water for local residents has been rejected. The Essential Services Commission says the $25 million project just isn't justified for the Flinders Ranges.
It's an issue that's been lurking in the taps for residents in the Flinders Ranges for some time.
The water is very heavily mineralised. We're serviced by a bore, so we do have water. It's treated to make it safe to drink, but it's very heavily mineralised, so plumbing fittings don't last very long. It isn't really very good for the garden.
SA Water took a proposal to the Essential Services Commission, which included a $24.8 million upgrade.
Their decision at this point was a connection to the Murray pipeline from Boolaroo as the closest, and that also would have dealt with issues that they have in the communities of Melrose and Wilmington as well.
But Escosa says the money towards the works, which would have seen improvements for 5,000 people, could help a lot more.
Could this money be spent, this $25 million be spent across the regions more effectively for all the people to make greater benefit for more people?
And it's a problem that won't stop anytime soon.
We'll continue working with SA Water and Escosa because, we do need a resolution to this, but we are very frustrated and very disappointed.
Laura Milovanovic, 7 Spencer Golf News.
A new state government initiative is tackling the issue of household waste with a new campaign. Regional residents are being urged to commit to simple recycling techniques which could make a major environmental difference.
The war on waste continues with this witch bin campaign calling for drastic action.
I wasn't going to put the bag in the bin. All recycling goes into the yellow bin, but never in a plastic bag.
Tina, I'm so sorry I doubted your recycling skills.
It comes as new statistics reveal a spike in household garbage amounts.
Up to 10% more waste heading into the general bin. We don't like this because South Australia has a great heritage at waste management and waste reduction.
People working from home, possibly taking away food from their eateries rather than eating in.
The state government urging regional residents who have access to a green bin to use it for food waste.
And there's no need for any of that to go into that general bin. That can go into the green bin. It can go through an industrial composting process.
But Port Pirie is one council who don't have green bins just yet.
No, they can't do that at Port Pirie at this stage. That might change in the next 12 months, but KSAP has an education program with Port Pirie Council.
Instead, residents are encouraged to think of innovative techniques to recycle their waste.
Compost them or put them in worm farms.
If all residents use bins the right way now, there could be future benefits.
And as a consequence, it can create jobs, it's good for the environment, and it reduces costs at council level as well, which should be passed on through council rates.
Shari Hams, 7 Spencer Golf News.
A Whyalla man has been caught drink driving with a blood alcohol level more than double the legal limit. Patrols stopped the driver on Scobell Street late on Friday evening in Whyalla Norrie. The 44-year-old allegedly returned a blood alcohol reading of 0.107. He was issued a 6-month loss of licence and will appear in court at a later date. 2 men have been arrested following a terrifying car robbery on the Lincoln Highway last week. It's alleged a 26-year-old Port Lincoln man assaulted a driver and then stole his car in the early hours of Thursday morning. Police later arrested and charged the man with robbery and assault. During the investigation, a second Port Lincoln man was also arrested and charged with trafficking a controlled drug. All 3 men were known to each other. Coming up after the break, Whyallah's community brass band celebrates a very special milestone for one of its treasured members, and a Port Pirie student recognised with a federal government scholarship. Welcome back. The Whyalla Community Brass Band held a very special celebration over the weekend for one of its treasured members. Raymond Powell celebrated a special birthday milestone of turning 98 years old by playing his cornet instrument with style.
Instruments in hand, the band treating Raymond to a special performance. Raymond Powell celebrating his 98th birthday the only way he knows how, surrounding himself with music.
Well, I've been a bandsman nearly all my life and I can't get away from it.
As far as our understanding is, Raymond is the oldest performing member in Australia now of any brass band.
Moving to Whyalla with his family almost 50 years ago, Raymond brought over his passion for music, originally joining the Salvation Army Band.
We came from England to Australia 1974 Christmas time.
He then found his way to the Whyalla Community Brass Band, performing with other members for the last 8 years.
At 98, he's an inspiration to all of us.
The popular band running for 10 years now, performing at community events across the city, with Christmas the band's busiest time of the year.
Being the only brass band north of Adelaide now, we are very proud of the fact of that.
Even at 98, Raymond says his favourite part is still being on stage and performing.
And he turned up and said if he was going to play, he wanted to play outside and not just sit in a room and rehearse all the time.
The band also helping with Raymond's health, the cornet instrument a tool in improving his breathing skills. It's also a chance for Raymond to socialise, the band taking him on as an important committee member.
Before I came in here, I felt really rotten. Now coming here with company is different altogether.
Sophia Contagonis, 7 Spencer Gulf News.
Almost $1 billion is up for grabs in an effort to help support the well-being of South Australian communities. The one-off grants are aimed to help support those struggling through what's been a tough start to the year for the nation.
While a major focus is on our physical health during the pandemic, a new scheme is providing support for our mental stability too.
We also have to pay attention to people's mental health during times of stress and anxiety. We have to give people stronger resilience so that they can make the right choices to get through this time.
The scheme is aimed at non-government organisations and local government to allow community projects, events and education ideas to get off the ground.
That'll help people's well-being, that'll give them the strength and the motivation and the ideas to get on through this time. So that's the sort of thing we want these organisations to be applying for.
Grants of up to $100,000 are being made available to help stimulate our communities, especially those in the regions.
Sense of community is often quite strong in the regions, but equally we do have challenges with isolation out in the regions, and we want organisations with a regional focus putting their hand up for these grants as well.
Calling on residents to keep strong through this crisis.
Our message to South Australians is hang in there. We're doing well as a state, but we have to pay attention to our mental health as well.
Laura Milovanovic, 7 Spencer Gulf News.
A Port Pirie University student has been awarded a federal government study scholarship for the next 3 years. Taylor Scarman is describing the grant of $18,000 for her nursing degree as life-changing.
Studying extra hard after receiving some good news, Taylor Scarman, one of few awarded a Rural and Regional Enterprise Scholarship.
It's up to $18,000 for the scholarship, and it's received over 3 years.
The scholarship program, as part of a federal government initiative, supports regional students with the costs of studying at a university level.
I don't like to rely on my parents, so I really like to pay for things myself, so this has really helped with my uni, especially in paying HECS debt in the future.
Taylor isn't the only Mid-North student to receive this incentive, with her fellow nursing student and now mentor awarded the same scholarship last year.
It's helped immensely, I guess, allowing me to focus more on my study and not so much the financial side of uni, which can be costly sometimes. So yeah, it's been really helpful.
Uni Hub staff celebrating these pupils, encouraging future regional students to apply.
Demonstrates how they're proactive, how they're looking forward to their study, and they're trying to find ways to make their study lives easier.
Regional learning is primarily online, which helped create minimal disruptions during the COVID-19 shutdowns.
There were some changes to residential schools and some face-to-face options that we had to alter, but generally students were already used to an online learning environment.
I guess with our nursing careers, we're still working, so yeah, not too much of an issue.
Shari Hams, 7 Spencer Gulf News.
Stay with us. Coming up after the break, Britt will join us with your week's weather. Hello again. Now let's hear from Britt Aylen with the weather.
Thanks, Louise, and good evening. Today saw maximums 1 to 2 degrees above average, with Port Augusta recording a high of 19 degrees after a low of 9 overnight. Whyalla reached 17 today, Woodna 16. 15 was the top temp recorded at Port Lincoln, Broken Hill and Coffin Bay, with Port Pirie, Kadina, Cleve and Adelaide all reaching a top of 14 degrees today. Taking a look at the satellite images, where we can see cloud extending across parts of South Australia thanks to a deep low over Tasmania, with onshore winds bringing showers to the Spencer Gulf region. That higher cloud to our north didn't bring any rain. To our west, a ridge of high pressure has developed today and will begin to move eastwards tomorrow. Now, speaking of tomorrow, let's have a look at those Gulf waters. Winds south to southwesterly at 15 to 20 knots, but reaching up to 25 knots at times in the south. Seas at 1 to 2 metres with south to southwesterly swells. It's going to be a partly cloudy day at Port Lincoln tomorrow, looking at a top of 16 degrees. Cleve partly cloudy and 15. Morning fog expected at Woodna, clearing to a mostly sunny day with a top of 16 degrees. Whyalla and Kadina both partly cloudy tomorrow with tops of 16. Port Augusta fine and 17. Fine and partly cloudy at Port Pirie tomorrow, 16 the high there. Clare partly cloudy with a top of 12. And Broken Hill with a partly cloudy Tuesday, looking at a high of 15 degrees. So that's tomorrow, but let's take a look ahead through the week now, with fine and partly cloudy conditions across the board on Wednesday. Woodna with a high of 18. Port Augusta and Whyalla both 17 degrees. Port Lincoln looking to reach 16. Broken Hill, Port Pirie, Kadina and the capital all 15. Thursday, sunny about the Eastern Eyre Peninsula, Flinders and Mid-North forecast districts. Fine and partly cloudy conditions elsewhere. A top of 19 for Port Augusta, Woodna looking to reach 18, Whyalla, Port Lincoln and Port Pirie all with tops of 17 degrees, Broken Hill, Kadina and Adelaide all 16. And finally to Friday, with a little bit of cloud over the region. 18 the forecast high for Port Augusta. Whyalla, Woodna and Port Pirie all 17 degrees. Broken Hill, Port Lincoln, Kadina and Adelaide all 15. And Louise, after a fairly wet weekend, I'm looking forward to the drier conditions this week.
Lovely, thank you for that, Britt. And that wraps up your local news this evening. Thank you, as always, for joining us. We'll be back later on with updates. Until then, have a lovely and safe evening. Good night.